Sorry, but I've decided to marry Kevin. I was stunned by Susan's words over the phone. Marry Kevin? Kevin is my husband. What on earth is she thinking? I was shocked when Susan called me before, telling me she was having an affair with Kevin. Sure, she had asked me to break up with him back then, but I never heard about them getting remarried. I bit my lip hard. How can you marry Kevin? When you get home today, ask him. Kevin said he's going to divorce you and marry me. Susan didn't back down, saying what she wanted and then laughing as she hung up the phone with a "see ya." I felt uneasy and restless, unable to stay calm until Kevin came home from work. Sure, Kevin seemed fed up with me, but divorce, really? What am I supposed to do? My name is Angela. I'm a 40-year-old clothing store clerk. I have a son and a daughter, but no husband. That's because I got married at 30 and divorced at 35. I'd like to explain step by step how I ended up marrying and divorcing my ex-husband, Kevin. I met Kevin when I was 29. He came to the clothing store where I worked. We carried both men's and women's clothing, so we had a decent number of male customers. One Sunday afternoon, I approached Kevin, who was having trouble choosing clothes. Can I help you find something? Oh, yes. I thought I'd try dressing up for a change. Kevin told me, shyly, that he wasn't used to picking out clothes. He usually bought cheap clothes randomly and didn't know how to dress stylishly. I started picking out clothes that would suit Kevin's well-structured face. As I selected a few items, I could see Kevin's expression brighten. These clothes are great. I'll take them. Thank you. I couldn't help but let my voice rise with excitement, and Kevin laughed with a haha. I felt embarrassed, but having someone buy the clothes I chose is the best part of this job. I completed the sale, unable to hide my smile. After that, Kevin came to the store often. As he became a regular, our conversations flowed, and we started talking about hobbies and other topics unrelated to clothes. One day, Kevin handed me a note. When I got home, I saw it was his contact number. After much consideration about our roles as clerk and customer, I decided to call Kevin. Hello, is this Kevin? I spoke nervously, and a familiar voice answered. Yes. I'm so happy you called. I was half giving up. Kevin laughed with a haha, and spoke in a cheerful, higher-pitched voice than usual. Though we usually interacted as clerk and customer on the phone, we talked like acquaintances. I learned he was 3 years older than me and worked in sales for a famous securities firm. He had attended a prestigious university, living the life of an elite. I wasn't attracted to Kevin's status, but for someone like me, who had no boyfriend at the time, meeting a serious man like Kevin and exchanging contact information was the happiest moment of my life. It might sound exaggerated, but I genuinely thought that at the time. Would you like to go on a date sometime? I'd love to. When Kevin asked me out, I immediately agreed. After a few dates, Kevin confessed his feelings, and we started dating. We hit it off from the beginning, with similar conversation speeds and hobbies. Our relationship continued for a year. During that time, there was never a doubt about our love for each other, and we smoothly moved towards marriage. I had just turned 30, so it felt like the perfect milestone year to get married. Kevin was also at the ideal age for marriage, and both sets of parents quickly gave their approval. So, we got married after 1 year of dating. After marrying Kevin, I immediately informed everyone around me. They all shared my joy, but I remember feeling embarrassed when my coworkers teased me about how we met in the store. Though I was happy, so it didn't bother me much at the time. We had successfully met each other's families, and we moved into a rented apartment we had chosen together, starting our married life. At first, our married life was smooth. Kevin often came home late because of work, so I handled all the household chores. The only thing Kevin did was take out the trash, but my job had flexible shifts, allowing me to finish work on time most days. Asking Kevin, who often worked 2 or 3 hours of overtime, to help more with housework felt wrong. I'm sorry for always making you do the housework, Angela. It's okay, it can't be helped. Besides, I like taking care of the house. At first, Kevin seemed to feel guilty about not being able to help much with the chores. Just knowing he felt sorry was enough for me. I respected Kevin's feelings and worked hard to balance my job and housework. However, after about a year, things began to change. I was promoted from a regular employee to a store manager. This promotion brought more responsibilities that I had to handle after regular hours. With a higher salary, it was inevitable. As a manager, I was determined to create a pleasant working environment for the staff. As my work became busier, I started neglecting household matters more often. Recently, we've been having the same meals a lot. One day, while eating dinner, Kevin mentioned this as he ate his stew. I'm sorry. Kevin was right. Since my work had gotten busier, I had been cooking large batches of chile or stew that could last for days. It was like the eating habits of a college student living alone, so I couldn't blame Kevin for being fed up. But at that time, exhausted from work, I couldn't accept Kevin's words. I was doing my best to manage both work and housework. If he didn't like what I cooked, he could make his own meals, I thought. In the end, I only apologized, but from that day, Kevin's attitude began to change. The next day, when I served the same stew as the previous night, Kevin visibly frowned. I knew it was bad to serve the same meal 2 days in a row, but there was still leftover stew. Even if I told him I didn't like eating the same food every day either, Kevin gave me a look that said, "So what?" I felt an urge to run away from the situation. We were both working hard every day. Since becoming a store manager, I couldn't shake the feeling of inequality between Kevin and me. In our first year of marriage, things started to turn sour, but in that year, I became pregnant with Kevin's child. When I told Kevin I was pregnant, he responded with a lackluster "Oh, I see." I was confused but convinced myself that he just hadn't realized he was going to be a father yet. About 8 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named him Mark, after Kevin. I took time off work to focus entirely on caring for Mark and managing the household. Before taking maternity leave, I was convinced that work was harder than raising a child, but that was not the case. Every night, I could only sleep in 1 or 2 hour intervals because of nighttime feedings. Changing diapers and preparing bottles were new to me. My son would cry endlessly for no apparent reason. I had almost no time to myself and felt like I had been thrown into the vast sea of parenting alone. Moreover, Kevin was not very involved in childcare. Even though I was struggling with first-time motherhood, he didn't even offer to help. He acted as if it was none of his business, pretending not to notice. When he came home from work, he exaggerated his fatigue and quickly retreated to the bedroom. Even if he couldn't help with childcare, I wished he would at least offer some words of encouragement. I wondered if I was being selfish for thinking that way. On the other hand, he did take care of financial responsibilities, such as contributing to a college fund for our child's future and paying for medical checkups. When I mentioned wanting to go to a beauty salon, he even hired a helper to give me some free time. He didn't participate in childcare himself, but he wasn't entirely uncooperative. I constantly questioned his inconsistent behavior. 2 years into this lonely parenting journey, I gave birth to our second child, a girl. We named her Mary, and once again, I was back to caring for a newborn, though I handled it more calmly than the first time. Still, with our older child being just 2 years old, taking care of 2 young children required a lot of patience. By this time, Kevin and I talked less and less. Kevin's overtime increased, and he often came home after I had already gone to bed. Even the no overtime Wednesdays he used to mention were no longer a thing, and he started coming home late on Wednesdays too. We were living completely separate lives. Although I tried to accept it, I couldn't help but feel lonely. Despite that, I was still happy at that time, unaware of what Kevin was doing under the guise of overtime. Our son Mark turned 4, our daughter Mary turned 2, and I turned 35. By then, I had returned to work, with both kids in daycare. I was no longer a store manager, as managing the store and raising 2 young children simultaneously was impossible. So, I decided that being a regular employee was more than enough for me. Things took a drastic turn that summer. One day, after coming home from work, picking up the kids from daycare, and starting dinner, my phone rang loudly, a rare occurrence. Wondering who it could be, I saw Susan displayed on the screen. Susan is my older sister by 3 years. As a stage actress, she was always busy and rarely contacted me. We were never particularly close. Susan was beautiful and popular with both men and women, while I was plain and reserved. We were often compared by our parents and friends, and I was jealous of Susan, who was loved by everyone. Naturally, I never wanted to get close to her. Even as adults, I convinced myself that we lived in different worlds. So, it was honestly surprising to receive a call from Susan. What could she want with me now? Thinking it might be a wrong number, I decided to answer the call since we were still sisters, after all. Hello. Oh, you finally answered, Angela. It was my sister's voice, sharp and not inviting for a long conversation. Why the sudden call? I asked directly, and I could hear Susan take a deep breath on the other end. Well, I'm dating your husband, Kevin. So, I want you to divorce him. Huh? The sudden truth from my sister nearly made me drop the knife I was holding. What? Didn't you hear me? I said you should divorce Kevin. What do you mean? Susan shamelessly asked me to divorce my husband, with whom she had been having an affair. I was too stunned to think clearly, frozen on the spot. Fortunately, the children were back from daycare and asleep, so they didn't see my distressed face. I mean exactly what I said. I've been dating Kevin for a long time. How long is a long time? Since when? Well, let's see. It's been since before your son was born, so, about 4 years? The length of time made my head spin. 4 years meant it started barely a year into our marriage, before my son was born. Why at that time? How could serious Kevin have ended up having an affair with Susan? Kevin said he was interested in me since he came over for the wedding greeting. At that time, well, since I was the bride's sister, he tried to keep it to himself. But then, we met by chance in town. When I invited him for coffee, he eagerly agreed. From there, it was so easy. Kevin was completely captivated by my charm. After a few dates, we started seeing each other regularly. Susan's recounting of the truth made me feel nauseous. The serious Kevin, having an affair so easily with someone like Susan. I was filled with disbelief. But thinking back on how Kevin barely talked to me at home and wasn't proactive with household chores or childcare, some things started to make sense. And then, an intense anger towards Susan welled up inside me. Susan was undoubtedly the one to blame. She seduced my husband and led him to develop feelings for her. She had always been popular, and it was no surprise that she could easily attract even someone else's husband. That's the kind of person Susan was, unlike me. How could you do something so despicable? I asked with a trembling voice. Susan didn't show any sign of remorse, which irritated me further. Oh, Angela. I just threw out the bait. It was Kevin who bit it. If he truly cared about you, the bait I threw out would have been like trash to him. But to him, it seemed like a feast. Susan's vulgar laughter made me want to punish her right then and there. But with her only reachable by phone, words were my only weapon. And Susan was far more articulate than I was. So, hurry up and divorce Kevin. Clinging to him is pointless. He's completely in love with me. Leaving behind only cruel words, Susan hung up before I could stop her. I was distraught for the rest of the day. I had never once considered the possibility of Kevin having an affair. And the fact that it was with Susan. Late that night, when Kevin came home, I confronted him. Hey, Kevin. Is it true you're having an affair with Susan? It took all my courage to ask. Kevin's body visibly shook at the unexpected question. How do you know about that? I expected him to deny it, but instead, he confirmed it easily. I stared at Kevin in disbelief. Susan called me today. She said she's having an affair with you and wants me to divorce you. Ugh. Having said this much, Kevin had no words left and fell silent. I wished he had at least denied it or shown some sign of regret. Kevin and Susan were really having an affair. The reality of it was crushing me. Every day after that, the house was chillingly cold. Only the children, unaware of anything, continued to play energetically as usual. Kevin had little contact with the kids, so I, despite my turmoil, vowed to interact with them as normally as possible. A month after our marriage fell apart, I received another call from Susan. "Hello? What do you want now?" "Oh, Angela, don't be so harsh. Have you thought about what we talked about last time?" Susan's high-pitched voice sounded as if she had done nothing wrong. "What do you mean?" "What we talked about?" "You know. I asked you to leave Kevin." I couldn't help but get angry at Susan's words. How long will she keep mocking me? Just as I was about to retort, Susan made a shocking statement. "Sorry, but I've decided to marry Kevin." Susan's words over the phone left me speechless. Marry Kevin. Kevin is my husband, what is she thinking? I was shocked when Susan previously called me to confess her affair with Kevin. Although she had asked me to leave him then, I never heard anything about them getting married. I bit my lip hard. "How do you expect to marry Kevin?" "Ask him when he gets home today. He said he'd divorce you and marry me." Susan, showing no signs of backing down, said what she wanted to say and then laughed as she hung up the phone with a bye. I couldn't sit still, my chest felt tight as I waited for Kevin to come home from work. Sure, Kevin seemed fed up with me, but divorce. What am I supposed to do? That day, I couldn't concentrate on work at all and returned home in a daze, putting the kids to bed mechanically. Around midnight, when Kevin came home, I confronted him with what Susan had said. "Are you planning to marry Susan?" Honestly, I didn't think Kevin was serious about Susan. I thought he was just being manipulated by her. But Kevin nodded awkwardly. "Yes." "What?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Is Kevin really going to marry Susan? I stared at him in disbelief. "I was going to tell you tonight. Angela, please divorce me. I want to marry Susan." Saying that, Kevin pulled out divorce papers from his work bag. His section was already filled out. I felt like crying as I looked at the divorce papers. Kevin was never a man of many words. He hardly helped with housework or childcare. But I thought he was working hard for our family. Kevin seemed resolute. He pursed his lips tightly, his expression stern and unyielding. "You're the worst." I felt all my trust in Kevin crumble as I reluctantly took the divorce papers. For a moment, Kevin looked relieved. I wanted to lash out at him right then, but I held back so as not to wake the children. And so, our 5-year marriage came to an end. After divorcing Kevin, my only concern was for the children. I absolutely did not want to be separated from my children. I continued to insist on this. In the end, I was awarded custody of the children and felt relieved. I also secured an agreement for child support to be paid monthly. Of course, I received a substantial amount of alimony from both Kevin and Susan. Still, the two of them seemed unfazed and went ahead with their remarriage. I didn't know where to channel my frustration. From then on, every day was truly tough. Even though I received child support, I had to support the household entirely on my own. I realized just how much Kevin had been financially supporting us. After working reduced hours at the apparel store, I took on as many work-from-home jobs as I could find. Even so, it was all I could do to keep the three of us fed, and we couldn't afford any fun activities like going on trips. Feeling guilty towards the kids, I saw their smiles while playing at the park and felt motivated to work even harder for them. As I worked desperately, 5 years flew by before I knew it. One Sunday afternoon, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Who could this be? I wondered as I answered the call. Part of me thought it might be a wrong number or a sales call. "Hello, is this Angela?" A faintly familiar voice made me search my memory for who it could be. It dawned on me that it was Kevin's mother, my ex-MIL. Is this Samael? I asked cautiously, not wanting to embarrass myself if I was wrong. Yes, it is. I'm sorry for calling you out of the blue. She knew about my divorce from Kevin due to his infidelity. She probably felt a sense of guilt towards me. Normally a timid person, she sounded even more subdued than usual. No, it's fine. Is there something you need? Receiving a call from my ex Samael now gave me a strange feeling. Yes, I'll get straight to the point. My son, Kevin, passed away yesterday from terminal cancer. What? I couldn't believe my ears at her words. Kevin died of terminal cancer. It was hard to believe. When he lived with me, he never showed any signs of illness. Sorry to shock you. We're still coming to terms with it ourselves. He was only 43. It was liver cancer, and by the time we found out, it was already terminal. An indescribable bitter feeling spread in my stomach. Kevin had betrayed me and married Susan. I could never forgive that. Even though he had died, that fact remained unchanged. However, I couldn't help but be shaken by the news of my ex-husband's death. And Kevin left a will. He mentioned you in it, so I was wondering if you could come by to hear his last wishes. I know it's a lot to ask. I understand. I was surprised to hear that Kevin mentioned me in his will. We had almost no contact after our divorce. Why would he mention me? With a sense of foreboding, I decided to follow my ex Samael's request. A week later, after Kevin's funeral and other arrangements were complete, his relatives gathered together. I left the children with my parents and headed to the location my ex Samael had specified. The process was to receive the will from the doctor at the hospital where Kevin had been admitted, get it probated at the family court, and have the official open it. Oh my, it's been a while, Angela. Recognizing Susan, I didn't know how to respond, so I ignored her. Susan looked a bit more haggard than before, her once beautiful face now seemed gaunt. Her harsh personality added a certain ominousness. Even with Kevin's death, I felt no sympathy for Susan. I would never forgive her for taking Kevin away from me. Finally, the official opened the will and began reading its contents. The relatives were all watching intently. Since marrying Susan, Kevin had been promoted to an executive at his company. Naturally, his salary must have increased significantly. Additionally, he had accumulated substantial assets, including real estate, since our marriage. Although we divided our assets during the divorce, there were still plenty left. I wasn't sure how much the relatives knew about this, but Susan certainly knew Kevin was wealthy. Susan seemed eager to find out how much of the assets she would receive. As the official read through the will, we were all shocked by the revelation. The will stated that all assets were to be left to me, and all debts to Susan. Of course, due to inheritance laws, Susan, as the wife, would still get half of the assets. However, Susan, who thought she would inherit everything since they had no children, was visibly distressed and angry. No way! What's this all about? Why am I getting the debts? And why is Angela, who divorced Kevin, getting the assets? Were you scheming with Kevin behind my back? Susan screamed, grabbing my collar, her hair wild. I don't know. I've hardly seen him since our divorce. I had almost forgotten about him until I got a call. Huh? That can't be true. Then why are you favored in the will? Well, honestly, I didn't understand it either. Why would Kevin leave me any assets? I wasn't a legal heir, so it was surprising he would mention me in his will. I was confused by this unexpected turn of events. At that moment, Kevin's mother stepped forward, holding an envelope. Since the will was with the court official, this seemed to be something different. Susan, the answer to your question is in this letter, Samael said firmly. Susan turned to her, startled. What? What do you mean? This letter was written by Kevin in the hospital and given to me. Unlike the will, it contains his thoughts. I intended to reveal it if anything happened. I will read it now. Samael opened the letter from Kevin and began to read its contents. Since I started feeling unwell, Susan has been feeding me excessively salty, sugary, and oily foods. She even began making fried chicken, which she had never made before, citing the hassle of cleaning up. When I pointed this out, she brushed it off, saying she was in the mood for rich flavors. Suspicious, I pretended to sleep one night and overheard Susan talking on the phone. She said, "His condition will worsen soon. Then we can share his inheritance." Realizing Susan was trying to hasten my illness, I decided she should not inherit my assets. Instead, I wanted to leave them to Angela. While I was married to Angela, I was too busy with work to devote time to the family. I truly loved Angela and the children. I regret not being there for them. Please forgive me for my infidelity. I am ashamed of my weakness. I want Angela and the children to be happy. As Mil read Kevin's letter, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Did Susan really drive Kevin to this? Isn't that going too far? The relatives began glaring at Susan. I was stunned by the unexpected contents of the letter. But knowing Kevin loved me and the children brought tears to my eyes. Kevin. I'm sorry too. I regretted not being more supportive when Kevin was struggling with work. Mil patted my back as I sobbed uncontrollably. What is this? This letter is fake. Are you accusing me of driving Kevin to his death? Ridiculous. This letter is a forgery. Susan shouted, still denying any wrongdoing. But Mil stepped in front of her and said firmly, "This is no forgery. This handwriting is definitely Kevin's. You committed a crime and show no remorse. You are not fit to inherit Kevin's assets. Leave immediately." Mil's fierce demeanor made even me tremble. What? This family is hopeless. Fine, I'll never come back. Don't ever show your face to me again, I shouted impulsively. I was done being manipulated by Susan. I resolved to honor Kevin's wishes and find happiness with my children. Susan stormed off, fuming. Thank you, Mil. No, I'm sorry I couldn't do anything for you when you and Kevin divorced. Please, be happy with your children. I felt grateful to have such a kind Mil. With Kevin's wishes firmly in my heart, I headed home. Since then, Susan has been burdened with substantial debts from Kevin's negative assets. Susan, who had been a stage actress, lost work due to aging since she married to Kevin. She became financially dependent on Kevin. Even though Kevin worked hard for his wife, he never suspected she was preparing meals to worsen his health for his inheritance. Had Susan not targeted his inheritance, they could have lived comfortably on his executive salary. Susan's actions showed she never loved Kevin. From the beginning, she seduced Kevin for his money, causing our divorce to claim his inheritance. I was horrified by Susan's ugly intentions. But now, Susan is living a nightmare. Her lover, with whom she planned to share Kevin's inheritance, was arrested for other frauds. Susan's involvement was exposed, and she was taken by the police. Susan's attempt to harm Kevin is now a crime she must face. Even if she is released from prison, she will have to repay Kevin's debts. I did not feel the slightest pity for Susan's bleak future. I hoped she would repent to the end and never repeat her mistakes. On the other hand, I used the inheritance from Kevin to take my children on our first trip to Hawaii. Seeing them smile and have fun made me happy. During our marriage, Kevin was awkward and unsure how to interact with the children, but now I understood he truly loved them. From now on, I wanted to cherish the precious memories Kevin left us and live happily with my children.